Hello, everyone. Hello. What a wonderful day. Good to see your smiling face. Good to see you alive on this side of the road. I'm M, CEO, Soul Focus Group, and Super Coach. And as always, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk to you, right? And so today I wanted to dive into a conversation about our mind, which is a very powerful conversation to have when you think about it. There's so much that our mind is capable of doing. Everything that you see created in the world was produced by some mind. In fact, at some point, most of the things you see did not exist out in the world until they existed in somebody's mind first. So it exists in somebody's mind, and then it is given birth to or manifested out in the physical world. So it's highly important that it is nourished and supported inside our mind, right? So think about all of the wonderful things you see out in the world. And there are some things that are not so wonderful. All that still comes from the mind. So the mind can produce wonderful, beautiful things. Our beautiful thinking mind can produce beautiful, wonderful things. But when our mind becomes dark, when our mind becomes scary, when our mind becomes ugly, it can produce a lot of ugly things. And so what I want to do is talk to you about what is the cause of the ugly mind, the things that in our mind that really don't serve us, that really don't work for us, that really cause us to do things that are destructive, first to ourselves and then to others. I want to say this, that we have two minds. We are only to have one, but we have two. The way this world is constructed and the way we have organized or socially constructed the rules of how things go in this world, we've constructed it where we have two minds. Now, that has not always been the case, but most of us are not familiar with the history, the ancient history, enough to understand the civilizations that were built on one mind, not two minds. What you see in the world today is a result of us having two minds. And in the Bible, it talks about the double-minded people, right? In the time where you have double-minded people. And what it's referring to is the two minds, right? So let's jump into this conversation, because many of you might be saying, I've never heard of any such thing that we have two minds. Well, just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There's a lot of things you haven't heard of that exist. So sit back, get yourself some popcorn and take a listen to what I'm about to tell you, because it really will open your eyes to, more than likely, what you are struggling with and why you are struggling so much within your mind. So what is the mind's job? First of all, let's get into that for a second so that you can see why what I'm about to talk to you is so perplexing. And it's not simple. It's a complicated conversation. It requires some thought on your part. It requires some mental exercise, some mind power to be exerted for you to really grasp what I'm getting ready to say. So we have two minds, two. And, the mind's job, first of all, is to act as representation of us. So our mind is supposed to accurately represent us, right? To who? To the outside world. Think of our mind as a lawyer, as you would a lawyer, and you're going to court and you need some representation. Your mind's job is to represent you, just like your lawyer would represent you, right? Not necessarily get you off from doing something you weren't supposed to do, but just think about that as in an analogy, that your mind is to act as a lawyer, representing you through your communication, through your manifestation, through all things such as that. Your mind is a representation of you, all right? So now having two minds would cause a problem, because we're gonna have a problem with representation. So just think for a second. How often in your day do you misrepresent yourself? Do you exaggerate your position, embellish upon things, and sometimes outright just lie about things? And you really for no reason at all. You don't even know why you did it. I remember there was times in my life I lied. I didn't even know why I lied. You know, it was so much of a practice of misrepresentation to the world, to other people, that I would find myself lying when it was no reason to lie. I had absolutely no reason to misrepresent myself, and yet I did. Which during that time I had no clue that what was going on was I was subject to my second mind. A lot of you are subject to your second mind, and you are not living out of your first mind. So there you have it. You have two minds: first mind, second mind. Now, let me set the stage so that, and you've heard me talk about this before, but I want to connect it to this so you can understand what does it mean to have a second mind, and what does it mean to have a first mind. Well, it was Carl Jung, famous psychologist and psychiatrist, who was also a student of Sigmund Freud, founder of the ego. And he would say this about what the ego was. He would say, and I love this phrase, this statement, because it really, puts everything in its proper context. He says that the world will ask you who you are. And if you say to the world you don't know who you are, then the world will proceed to tell you who you are. And who the world tells you that you are will become your ego, or becomes your ego. Now, I want you to get that when we say ego, what we are talking about actually is our second mind. That's right. We're talking about our second mind. And here's the thing why the second mind is so tricky, because the world told us, if you can't say who you are, if you don't know who you are around a certain age, and here's the kicker. When we come into this world, we all experience what I consider a bout of spiritual amnesia, because of the pain of growing inside our mother's womb, tight space, growing bones and brains and muscles. You can imagine how scary it would be if our memory of it would be awakening us. So in order to protect us from the pain of growing in a small, tight space, we shadow certain parts of our memory. So when we come out into this world, we often forget who we are. Now, get that who we really are is ancient. We've been here forever. We have no birth date, the real us. So now when we come into this world, we don't know who we are. We're experiencing spiritual amnesia. And then we come into a world that's already in motion. People are already moving. People are already doing things. And we have to get up to speed with how the world works. And so, of course, our parents teach us, the people close around us teach us, and they teach us how the world works based upon example. We don't listen so much for what people say. We watch what people do, and we pick up on what people do. And then that becomes a habit for us, and we begin to see and treat the world the way we see the world treat and react to the people closely in our lives. So essentially, if life was a game, if life was a video game on earth, then we would end up playing the video game exactly as we see our parents or those around us play the game. So we end up, think about this, we end up in some of the same situations as our parents because we learned to play the game like they played the game. Doesn't mean if it's right or wrong. We're not even talking about if it's right or wrong way to play the game. It was just how they were socialized to play the game, because they learned the same way we learned, through observation. All right, fast forward. So when you don't know who you are, the world tells you who you are. And the world doesn't tell you by you go stand in line to some administration building and they give you a card. This is who you are. And then you start being it. No. The way the world tells you who you are is through narratives, through storylines, through messages that we receive on a regular basis. Messages about your race, messages about your gender, about your sexual orientation, message about your economic status. We are constantly receiving messages about who the world thinks we are based upon those things. And then we adopt those things and they become our identity. And then we take those things on as who we are. Little do we know that that is not our first mind. In other words, that's not our first will. That's not our first mission for coming into this world. It is the second one. And what it ends up being is the mission that the world has given us to take on. So essentially that mind, our second mind, does not work for us. Our second mind works for the world. It is employed by the world. And you see yourself being more loyal to the world than you are yourself. I'm M, CEO of the Soul Focus Group and Super Coach. I love you.